Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of video game news. Today is Wednesday, August 21st. You know, as I see and get these helpful reminders from YouTube that the average view time is 5 minutes, I really just have to ask, like, how do those channels get around to having 20-30 minutes of wait time before the videos and the live streams actually happen? In particular, opening games night live just happened yesterday is a great example of one of those. But then there are just like some weekly channels that live stream, and then there is just this major wait and listen to this music that happens before that whole process. And they just, I guess, have, when you're starting off with 100,000 subscribers, you can afford to lose a large percentage of people, or you have just gained enough credibility by the number of subscribers that you get people to stick around. Whereas if you're a small-time YouTube content creator and you barely have 900 subscribers, that seems to have a lot of random people come in and lose interest immediately. In particular, I'm trying to think about like these streams, is how can I prevent that from happening? There is a thought certainly in that, since I'm just showing a computer screen, I'm not showing natural colors or natural objects. I'm not showing human beings, for instance. And so there is something perhaps to that thought that I'm just having now, that maybe if I just pulled up game screenshots or gameplay video and had that as my background, I'm taking a break. I mean, something like that might work. It's I'm not sure 100% fair use, but then as long as it's stuff that is for advertisement purpose, that's not copyrighted anyways. So that there's a thought there, and that's definitely what I've been doing recently. I'm somewhat bearing the lead in that Black Myth Wukong has made a massive number of players, beating Counter-Strike 2, which is funny because I very much in my mind, if I didn't say it out loud, was thinking that Counter-Strike 2 would always be in the #1 spot of concurrent players and always be in the #1 spot as far as total numbers of players. Although I guess maybe that's not even true. If we look at this chart, it seems like PUBG at one time was much higher, and Palworld was even much higher. Palworld's not even on the top 10 list. So yeah, a lot of people playing Black Myth Wukong. It'll be interesting to see what the final feelings are on that. Seems like some mainstream video game journalists went out of their way to probably attack it more than it needed to be attacked, and aren't doing a particularly good job in some examples of attacking it for its actual content that's actually in the game. On the other hand, even the people who are not mainstream video game journalists, YouTubers that I've seen review it and talk about it, they do seem to point out that it is very much a simplified experience, I guess would be the best way to explain it, and it isn't going to be Dark Souls with monkeys as much as it's been sold like that, in the sense that Dark Souls has large open world environments and lots of things going on. Black Myth Wukong seems to be much more linear than that. Not 100% linear, but much more linear. I imagine a lot of the numbers here are Chinese players, perhaps playing via VPN outside of the Great Firewall of China. I also wonder how many people are just going to want to play as a monkey, particularly Westerners who don't really care about the journey to the West. storyline and themes. The interesting thing also about Journey to the West as a Westerner is what do they really mean to the West in that case? In my suspicion, Journey to the West means you start somewhere in one of the feudal states pre-China on the east coast of China, and you work your way to the west of more mainland China, modern day mainland China, but the West probably stops at the Great Wall at most, and that is what I assume they're referencing. Banana's still holding on very tightly. This also is fair to say Black Myth Wukong feels like the first of the significant AAA, AA games to come out this year, so that is excluding Stellar Blade and forgetting about Stellar Blade, certainly. But it is probably also noticeable that Stellar Blade and Black Myth Wukong really are the only two big things to be announced and shown. And, well, not announced, but released. But yeah, I've been doing a lot of thinking in between the few seconds that I've had free, which has been very, very little and just decreasing rapidly, much to my for lack of a better word, disappointment. But yeah, I've been thinking about getting the color palettes to stay consistent, but also when I think about that, getting the color palettes to stay consistent on what I'm showing, there is a level of just human feeling. Like when somebody has a camera and has their face in the camera, something like that seems to resonate with viewers a lot more than I probably understand. Maybe I'm a little antisocial in that aspect, I don't know, but I probably am. But yeah, black text on a white background is just so minimal compared to the wide range of colors you would show with a face cam setup. That it does just give a different feeling. Obviously it gives a different feeling, but I don't know why the other feeling appeals, other than it's just what most people do. Sure, I could get a face cam and just read off the screen, which is what I imagine a lot of people really are doing, is they're teleprompting or reading off the screen. But I just don't want to do that, and I don't think it would really work. I'm not really front of camera material, for lack of a better way of saying I'm ugly. But yeah, I guess I could be like some of the other characters and fake my face and have a humanoid avatar type character, but I don't see a lot of that. Geometry Dash. So one of the things that I've been working on, and I want to show this, is a new Excel sheet form for the trending. And so in this new way of doing things, my macro is going to submit just the name of every game in its spot, all 100 of the top 100, which is a much higher sample size, but it's kind of important to just get all 100 of the top 100. And then I had gotten this whole proof of concept to work, but I was using really small bits of information, which proved to be my downfall yesterday, and I'll explain why in a second. But then the next step is, after you get it automatically submitted into this format, it takes the next step of reversing it and limiting it to just the most recent amount, which I have programmed as 156 as far as the limit. So 156 samples, 3 times a week, 52 weeks. That's where you get 156 from. That way, the most relevant information is the newest information by reversing it. Now, the next step that I was working on the small samples, in which I had only 3 or maybe 4 bits of information, was to explode the information. So everything that was in the first spot, in this case it would have been Black Myth Wukong, would have been exploded and repeated 100 times. Everything in the second slot would be repeated 99 times. Everything in the third spot 98 times, which, not doing the math, is 100 factorial as far as the amount of content that would show up in the sheet. 100 factorial is trillions upon trillions upon trillions. I'm probably not even saying the right word. It's so many numbers, so many different spots here. It's more atoms than are in the universe. And so I just hadn't done the math. It works when you have 3 factorial. 3 factorial is just 3 times 2 times 1, 6. 4 factorial is just 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which I think is 28. Or 24, something like that. But yeah, with every number going up factorial wise, it gets larger and larger. 2 factorial is just 2 because it's 2 times 1. 1 factorial is 1. So it starts small, but it gets big really fast. And frankly, it's a dumb way to program things. It was about the stupidest way I could figure out, or I went down as far as paths to figure it out. There's really no reason to explode the numbers, the names like this, when really all I'm trying to do is give 100 points to every game that is in the first slot, give 99 points to every game that's in the second spot, because the very next step, when it was working, was then just taking all of that and squishing it back down and de-exploding it, which there is your indication as far as setting up any programming, which Google Sheets, Excel sheets are a minimal form of programming, definitely lackluster compared to any other form of programming. But you can see the error here is that the concat is longer than the limit of 50,000 characters by far. So then when it was working, it was squishing that back down so that it would have Black Myth Wukong, and then it would have here a summation of its 2 days worth of 200 points, 100 points each. And so it would have said Black Myth Wukong 200. That then gets filtered by a blacklist just to eliminate things like the source base engine. And then that would eventually lead to a bar graph. Now, one of the things I don't like about this bar graph when it was working is the fact that the color of the bar is blue just for all the bars instead of being multicolored, and I feel like that's a weird choice, but to fix that will take possibly some manual work more than it's really worth it. And so yeah, that's been what I've been working on. I don't want to get too into the weeds on that, since that is just very much nerd stuff. My keyboard's too far away now. Meanwhile, that is still just a testament to how little I actually want to schedule things. because I certainly could have been scheduling videos instead. I certainly could have been working on other parts of the macro to open all the news, which that all needs some work too. But yeah, I'm just working on it in chronological order, and inherently working on an Excel sheet is difficult because I know what I want to do. It's the difficulty of translating what is more common and more standard programming concepts to an Excel sheet. To do the exploded alone was just easier to repeat the exact same line of commands 100 times than it was to figure out how to compress that down into one for loop, because there really isn't such a thing as a for loop in Excel. There's ways to kind of simulate it, but there is no command for. Plus, Excel still struggles heavily when dealing with text. It really is expecting numbers and barely handles text for a lot of its functions. And I'd also say the form inputs from Google Forms really aren't oriented very nicely either, in that you get a timestamp by default, you can't avoid it, and then however you format the form, it is always going to be a horizontal row, when most of the time it probably would be better if it was a column. But yeah, you can switch that around pretty easily with just a transpose command. But yeah, that is another factor that makes it more difficult to work with the data. So inherently, I set it up to run my new trending thing, so I don't believe you really have any new data or going to get any new data for this old chart. But I certainly do like the colorfulness of this line chart, but I don't really see it being that helpful. See, the bar chart overall would give less data, and there is some element to that I am trying to actively create, but the line chart here would make more sense in that if Naraka Blade Point, for instance, or Elden Ring, let's say Elden Ring here, if this game shoots up in popularity and shoots down, I'd like to be able to follow that trend instead of only having a chart that is just saying today, as of the latest sample, this is where the games are as far as popularity. So yeah, I probably will spend some extra effort and try and make a line chart like this. But I am sampling 100 games this time in the new trending chart, and I would like to talk about more than just what the top 10 games are. Otherwise, nothing's really going to change. And inherently, that's the problem with this chart, is that while it's giving me fairly precise amounts of the 24-hour peak of concurrent players, which I've come to feel is not very useful information, the range of whether an Apex Legends day is 319,000 players versus whether it's 302,000 players is just not that useful of information, when you could just squish that down to saying it was in the 98th spot and then it was in the 97th spot one day. But yeah, I want to highlight more games. So obviously there's just some more work that needs to be done. And we can see on Steam, they have gone out of their way to promote it, Black Myth Wukong. Although I think when you see this is being paid for. As far as the whole don't talk about feminist politics rule given to some of the streamers, it seems like this Chinese company that made Black Myth Wukong is kind of a small Chinese company that probably has said something or had something mistranslated that has been claimed to be sexist. But I'm not really getting deep into the details to really care. I don't think I really care at all. At a certain point, you separate the art from the artist. You kind of have to. And yeah, the whole cancel culture nonsense needs to mostly go away unless they've got some major receipts and can really point it out, which it doesn't seem like they can. Otherwise, more people would be talking about this story. Yeah. Feminism in Asian countries and different countries in general are drastically different than it is in Hollywood, California, or for example. The opening games night in Gamescom opening games night event happened. They announced Borderlands 4. I watched the trailer for Borderlands 4, and the only thing I can assume is that they rushed to make a trailer for Borderlands 4 and they have nothing else. It is interesting on the trailer that it says a Gearbox game. That doesn't inherently mean it's a Gearbox made. It's made by Gearbox or from Gearbox. Now that 2K owns them, and yeah, they're just trying to get people to mostly forget about the existence of the movie. It also feels like, having not played Borderlands 3, feels like Borderlands 4 could certainly follow a different path. Since Borderlands 3 kind of seems like it followed a different path, it could seem like you're not really on Pandora. That the trailer showed a robot hand picking up a psycho mask and a planet being exploded or because of its being full of iridium. So they've been hinting at and teasing and working towards the thought that Borderlands as a game was going to be on different planets and be more of a galactic experience. And as it continuously pushes in that direction, there is just the danger that you are going to make something that is very much different from Borderlands 1 and 2, which is my experience. And inherently that happens to a lot of game series, is that you have Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 and all the two trilogies of games, and then 3 and 4. By the time you're even at like 3, Assassin's Creed has changed quite a bit, and Origins and the most recent Assassin's Creeds are completely different games. Here we can see Black Myth Wukong is overwhelmingly positive, so nobody's heeding the call for any real boycott. My only real concern there is I hope this doesn't send a message to Chinese companies, though, that they can just constantly make things based on Journey to the West and get it to sell in the West, because that is not what's happening here. I guarantee that. And there's already been decades upon decades of examples of Journey to the West based games that have failed miserably when trying to leave the China mainland or the Asian countries. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I also heard, is coming to PlayStation. I would have assumed that was the case. I think in that case you probably should assume that they kind of know that it's not going to sell particularly well once the initial impressions come out, and once people realize that it is just not as much of the game as I think they think it is in their heads. And so it's almost certainly the wise move to sell it on all platforms day one and get as many enthusiastic pre-orders as possible before reality settles in. I heard that there was a non-VR mod for Half-Life Alyx, which does pose an interesting thought, certainly, as far as should I justify buying a game like that is that way. I didn't hear performance was particularly great with Black Myth Wukong. I wouldn't really expect it to. But also, I'm just not expecting my computer to be that powerful these days. I'm still seeing some black frame flickering just randomly. I saw it while I was just working in Firefox, and so I do think that I probably need to go and reduce the speed on my RAM some more. It sucks, but there's just, I think, some false advertising that happens on whether CPUs, motherboards, and RAM sticks can actually hit the speeds that they're promising with a level of consistency. Now, I am certainly using a lot of RAM, so that does push things, but yeah, I can't really blame my graphics card for black frame insertion when I have OBS closed and I'm just working on an Excel sheet. So let's go ahead and go through the news. Today's stream needs to be a little bit shorter anyways. Phil Spencer says there's going to be more changes. Phil Spencer speaks at the Indie PlayStation 5 news. The executive claims that Xbox console players are as high as ever. I also heard that there was a glitch, quote unquote, where other game Windows launchers showed up on Xbox consoles, which, yeah, it does seem to me like at the very least they're doing tests to the possibility of letting other launchers be on the Xbox consoles, which certainly, since the Xbox is in last place between PlayStation and Nintendo Switch, as far as consoles go, let's ignore the Steam Deck and not call it a console in this example. It would make a lot of sense for them to include other launchers, and I could see them getting the Epic Games Store on their consoles. I could see them getting Steam. Steam would be a major twist, certainly, if all of a sudden there was just a different launcher there. But they very likely would also start small and just start allowing EA Play launchers or Uplay, Ubisoft launchers on their storefront, and just make it less of a walled garden, perhaps just to put pressure on PlayStation and possibly even Nintendo to do the same. They really have nothing to lose since they're already in last place. And yeah, inherently, I think it is also a case where Phil Spencer, now being in charge, just wants to make changes. Like, new guy always wants to make changes, always wants to do something different so he can put his name on it if it succeeds, and if it fails, he can just blame somebody else. They have also announced digital and only Xbox Series X. So there is the 1TB SSD in Robot White that's all digital. There is an all digital Xbox Series S, not X, that is 1TB SSD in Robot White. And it is maintaining the same thin form factor, whereas the Series X here is maintaining the larger square form factor and just losing a disk drive. And then there is a special edition Xbox Series X that is not all digital and still does have a disk drive. It is 2TB in Galaxy Black, which the space that a disk drive takes up is kind of a lot. So it is kind of crazy that they're just maintaining the same shape for an all digital version. Like, for the amount of space this takes up, you could easily have two 2.5 millimeter hard drive slots if you wanted 2.5 millimeter SATA like laptop drives in there. Or you could have at least one 3.5 inch, not millimeter, 2.5 inch. You could have one 3.5 spinning hard drive in there, which, yeah, for the bulk purchase price of disk drives, you could easily get 4 to 6 terabytes of a spinning hard drive added to the old digital version. Just a really slow spinning hard drive with a lot of space as a sales point. I'm not gonna bother to scroll down here and read the rest of this, but I'm assuming if it's still called the Xbox Series X, it is going to perform exactly the same, even if it did have different hardware in it, which might have slight hardware internal refreshes, but nothing that I imagine really changes anything. And where can we really go as far as changes anyways? Like, I guess technically 8K might exist somewhere, but nobody's making 8K TVs or monitors, and the Xbox can't handle that. You really can't handle 4K. You're getting rid of the disk drive, so it being able to play 4K discs goes out the window in that case. So yeah, all you're going for is smoother frame rates and higher frame rates at that point, since the resolution really isn't going to go up. They still haven't figured out the trick to put a Siri device or a speaker inside of these things, which Microsoft's not really promoting. I think it was Siri. Yeah. Cortana. Yeah. It was Siri is Apple. Cortana is what Microsoft. Yep. Yeah, I haven't even seen them say anything as far as Cortana. I think they've renamed it to something completely different. They're not promoting any AI with this either. You could definitely throw a camera, like a pan tilt zoom type camera, in the front of a console, and I don't know if you really would want that though. But a smart speaker makes the most sense, and it barely makes sense. Apparently, moving on to the next story, apparently Peter Molyneux thinks Albion can't be copyrighted. That's the exact copyright claim. He's explaining how his new game is going to be set in the same world as Fable, but it's not actually Fable or anything. Inherently, Microsoft owns Lionsgate or Lion's Head, which owns the intellectual property of the Fable and Fable franchise. And Microsoft has certainly put out a trailer implying that they're working on a new Fable game, which seems fairly believable. So this definitely feels like Peter Molyneux trying to throw a monkey wrench in the work by outright claiming, outright ripping off something that, while he may have had a hand in creating, he doesn't have the rights to now. The name itself, Albion, being a made up word, very possibly is trademarkable, and a lot of the concepts in Fable are very much copyrightable, and so this is going to be one of those weird lawsuits that's almost certainly going to happen, where the creator of something sells the rights of that thing, that franchise, to a different company, and then makes something different that is far too close to it. But I mean, this is way too close. If you were going to say it was in the same style of Fable, that's one thing, but to use the same name to call the game Masters of Albion is actively trying to create market confusion. And this is one of the few examples where copyright probably should exist, when for the most part I think copyright is useless and shouldn't exist. This is someone actively aggressively trying to create confusion in the marketplace. I don't feel like creating a world makes it free. Now, the word Albion might have some historical context, and so if you use the word Albion in that way, that's one thing, but the unique elements that have been introduced or created in previous Fable games are copyrightable. So yes, you could have a world called Albion that is completely different and does not share any similarities at all. Yes, you might get away with that technically, but in reality, almost certainly Peter Molyneux is going to get found to be infringing. There's just no way around it. If you were it would have to be the difference between I'm making a game set in a world called Albion and it's a cyberpunk dystopian world, much like Cyberpunk 2077. That would be fine. Like, there would be no similarities. But if you're making a fantasy world that feels and looks a lot like the Albion of Fable, every single element there that's similar is going to be a point in a lawsuit, and you can easily overwhelm a jury, or more likely a judge, and if you have lawyers make up a list of here's 1,000 elements that are unique to Albion that are being copied from the Fable games, or unique to the Fable games that are being copied in Masters of Albion. And this is just an incredibly unprofessional thing for Peter Molyneux to do. Notably, Peter Molyneux's newest companies and newest efforts have all been failures. They've been small-time projects. They've only gained any attention because Peter Molyneux's name was attached to them, and there's certainly some scamminess to some of his previous projects. There's been some weirdness in some of his projects, in that they're being released in just small areas, like Taiwan. I think was one game was just released in Taiwan. But yeah, certainly Peter Molyneux is on the outskirts of the gaming community, and it seems like for good reason. but people never go away fully. Unfortunately, I would say even his new company is going to flop. So anybody that works at that company, and that sucks certainly for an employee who's working under just trying to keep a job and trying to create a portfolio. I don't think I would hire anybody that worked for Peter Molyneux's new company, because I don't think they would have been given the opportunity to make good games or release new games. Yeah. I would be extremely shocked if this doesn't end up in a cease and desist lawsuit very quickly. Take a similar experience from Bethesda, where Captain Sparkles tried to, well, he did eventually make a game and he changed the name, but it originally was called Fortress Fallout, and it was a cell phone game, and this was before Bethesda had ever made a cell phone game like Fallout Shelter. Several months later, they announced Fallout Shelter, but just having a game called Fortress Fallout had Bethesda send out a cease and desist to Captain Sparkles, which he, if he had infinite money, could have fought, certainly, or ignored, and it would have been perfectly fine to have a game called Fortress Fallout and then Fallout Shelter come out. There really wouldn't have been any real confusion there. But when you have that level of legal litigiousness happening at Bethesda, and Bethesda at the time I think was still part of Microsoft, you can certainly expect that same level of litigiousness from Microsoft proper. And maybe there's a case that UK law is slightly different than United States copyright law, but it wouldn't really change too much. If anything, this might just cause Phil Spencer to be mad at Gamescom and maybe Jeff Keighley directly for allowing this new game to even be announced. Let's see, a Lego Super Mario Kart sets have been confirmed for 2025. These look particularly terrible. Now, is there possibly some trick to this with the blockheads nonsense? Which these look like different blockheads than even the other blockheads that were the electric ones. I don't think there really is. I don't think that there's anything. I would assume what this is that they're going with blockheads because this is supposed to be a set for little kids. There are some fairly small pieces though if this is supposed to be a set for little kids though. If anything, it seems like what they're doing is they're just trying to keep the parts number small so that you can end up buying a whole bunch of them. Which, yeah, I guess this kind of makes some sense if they're doing the whole series. But I have been completely disappointed with most of the Nintendo Lego crossover sets. Certainly is not as good quality or as interesting as the Star Wars crossover sets were. But yeah. Actually, I haven't seen a recent Lego set that's even caught my attention much at all, nor if I had any time to actually do any Lego sets. The Game of Thrones star Gwendolyn Christie is going to be the narrator of Civilization 7. And here's an example of an image that's been squished in a poor way. Although weirdly, this is the first time that that's even made that obvious. Let's see, here's all the big announcements at Gamescom Opening Night Live. Yep. And see, inherently it still is just a case where it's not worth my time, even as a video games journalist, if I want to call myself that, to sit through all these announcements, unless I was going to just do a live watch and react and do something like that, and even that would be probably a waste of time. It's just way more efficient to wait for Video Games Chronicle or any other of my news sources to write up all the announcements. Most of these are going to be just new games. Yeah, this is basically all you really see in the Borderlands 4 teaser trailer, is that you see this robot hand and you see a Psycho Mask. It is interesting that the Psycho Mask's eyes are glowing. But yeah, it does make it very much seem to me like Pandora is going to be blown up and just not the main focus. Dying Light the Beast is a new standalone game, which is probably something that would have been DLC for Dying Light 2 if Dying Light 2 had sold better. Instead, I think they may just try to have several standalone games. Most of these, though, are just teaser trailers with very little information. Here we have Genshin Impact officially coming to Xbox. That might be a big boon for Xbox. But that also may be way too late, because I doubt new players to Genshin Impact are going to have as good of an experience as new players to Genshin Impact would have had when they first released, unless they're just going to roll back everything. Monster Hunter Wilds gameplay. But yeah, inherently there are going to be individual announcements about each of these games. I would assume almost all of these games are coming out either extremely late 2024 or more likely in 2025. So this is just a list of things to get hyped about for 6 months to a year from now. Meanwhile, we already have a list of games to be hyped about from previous years and announcements that have either disappeared or released to little fanfare. Marvel Rivals, Monument Valley 3. Monument Valley being a simplistic game, it's probably a little slow to release a third one. Although, even Monument Valley 2 had very little gameplay. It was different from the first game. It was fine. It was just more of the same. Yep. Let's see. Now there was this weird anthology series that Amazon Prime has announced. It's going to be based on Mega Man, Spelunky, Unreal Tournament, and more, called Secret Level, which they're calling an adult animated anthology series. Which in a lot of ways I assume this is that they gave some money to some animators and said that you loosely have to base it off the theme of these games so that there's a connecting theme. And then they let the animators, I imagine, just do whatever they want. There was a similar series on Netflix that was pretty good. I think it was called Sex, Drugs, and Robots or something like that. Sex, Violence, and Robots or something like that. And same idea. They gave a general wide description of what they had to do to a bunch of different animators, and then paid the animators to make shorts. And I imagine the shorts, the animators didn't get paid much for it. Seems like that's probably what they're doing. It's not the worst thought, too. Keep the animators working, make these little pilot videos, animated shorts to see what might catch on. Keep animation fans happy, which, I mean, it's hard to get animation these days if you want to watch animation, and particularly adult animation. If there's still plenty of it, but as far as shorts, there's not a lot. Batman Arkham Shadow was apparently announced, which, yeah, I guess we should expect more Batman, but this is a VR game too, so you still really are nowhere close to getting another proper Batman game, it seems. And that we should be getting some kind of Batman game always, but they screwed up so many of the Batman games lately, and WB is just looking, I think, to divest. And weirdly, they may very well just divest from the Batman series and have other companies make them. Here, Peter Molyneux unveils his new God game, Masters of Albion, which, yeah, all he would have had to do is make a different name and it would have caused less controversy, but I think his new game may sell exclusively on controversy. Path of Exile early access release dates being revealed. Indiana Jones coming to the PS5 wasn't revealed. Mafia: The Old Country is going to be released in 2025. That's probably a smart way to go with the Mafia series, because they went in the wrong direction with the most recent Mafia game, in that you weren't actively, I think, playing as a mafioso or as an Italian person. I've never actually sat through the Godfather movies. They always just seem to be too long, and I think that's probably going to be my experience with the Mafia games too, is that I'm just not that into it as a concept. And I think that's probably true for a lot of people are afraid to admit that they don't want to watch Scarface, they don't want to watch The Godfather. So those are probably great movies that a lot of people love. I know a lot of people love them, but I think they are just also kind of a genre of movies that leaves a lot of people flat. And there's plenty of other things. Plenty of people don't like horror movies and don't watch them. I would say, though, that probably also is reflected in the amount of success that the Mafia game series, which is going to be a niche on a niche, has. It's not that much. Game Awards date has been confirmed for December, which I still feel like the Game Awards and award seasons in general for video games should probably happen in closer to February, just after the whole Christmas setup has happened. People are too tied to the idea of award shows need to be at the end of the year, when in reality that is about the last point in which you should be giving out Game Awards, because games are still coming out up till Christmas in most years, and giving it even just 2 months to play games and have reviewers play the games a little bit more, and then have an award show in the dead time of February makes a lot more sense. So inherently, I guess if I ever get around to making an award show for my YouTube channel, which would be a much smaller thing, I would do it in February. And it wouldn't be so much an award show as just a year in review, which I want to lean more into years in reviews in general, and not just giving out awards and being hyper positive. Apparently, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle Collector's Edition is an 11-inch globe. While I do have a small passion for globes, I don't think I would buy something like this. Inherently, a lot of globes are super cheap, cheaply made, and so you may find that, like most collector's edition elements, that it may be fairly easy to break or fairly poor quality. And I guess the question is, does it even open in the middle? And do you have all the games and things squished into the middle of the globe? Does it come with some assembly required? I'm also assuming that the Great Circle is not just the globe and the world. That would be kind of boring. That might be exactly what it is. Little Nightmares 3 new friendship trailer shows off the co-op adventure. Mafia the Old Country is going to be released in 2025. Coming to PS5C. So now we just have every single news story from Video Games Chronicle being repeated here as its own individual story headline, which, yeah, that is wasteful, certainly as far as wasting players' time. I don't want to watch this entire trailer, but I want to see, yeah, from the Visionaries of Love, Death, and Robots. That's the name of the series, is a whole new anthology series. So that Love, Death, and Robots was a 2-season Netflix thing. Now they're pigeonholing themselves more to be inspired by video games. Whereas previously Love, Death, and Robots was very loosely pigeonholed into the thought that it needed to have at least the theme of love, death, or robots in it, which would include almost everything. Seeing these animations, they seem to be mostly similar in style. So, yeah, I'm seeing a little bit of variety here, but not much. I'm also assuming that these are going to be at most like 15-minute shorts. So yeah, they can't really ruin the narrative or the names of any of those companies that they're licensing. They're probably wasting money licensing, though. Yeah, it's less of an intriguing offering than Love, Death, and Robots. Really, you're gonna give me a non-canonical animated short based off of a video game. That's basically just fan fiction. It's going to be very nicely animated fan fiction. It is intriguing and nice, though, for Amazon Prime, because Amazon Prime, while they do have Invincible as an animation and maybe a couple other things, they are fairly lackluster in animation as far as original content, and they're fairly lackluster as far as original content in general. So it is nice to see Amazon Prime putting more money into original content, perhaps putting less money into just the major successes, such as The Boys. But yeah, video gamer wise, I'm not hyped about that. Let's see, Starfield Shattered Space story expansion launches in September. Monument Valley 3 is coming to Netflix this year. So, Netflix gaming exclusive. Again, I doubt you're going to miss too much, and eventually it will almost certainly come out. It'll almost certainly come out to other consoles later. It's going to feature the most immersive world building yet, which I don't know what that really means. Marvel Rivals is, I don't think, from Second Dinner. So we have yet another Marvel game. I don't think it's a fighting game, though, either. Let's actually watch the trailer here. See if we can get a general idea of what this even is. It's probably not going to show me anything. Nope, this feels much more like it is a hero shooter like Overwatch type game. And is this supposed to be Bucky that they're playing as? When did Bucky have a tentacle arm element? Yeah. Well, looks like there might be some interesting environmental destruction elements to it, but otherwise I'm thoroughly uninterested in yet another Marvel game. First look at Civilization 7. New Monster Hunter Wilds gameplay was shown. Genshin Impact coming to Xbox. The original Little Nightmares studio Tarsier reveals its new game called Reanimal. Is that the one with the pig whose stomach was cut open? Yeah, it was. I think it was. So it seems like they're really just expanding on that Little Nightmares concept, being even more horrific and gory and weird. I guess these kind of work, being chased by monsters and seeing horrific imagery. Yeah. Side-scrolling horror, I think probably does work. Amazon announced that ex-Lionhead developers have an online co-op spectacle called King of Meat, which, yeah, you say ex-Lionhead developers, and I think Lionhead was the team that originally was making the Fable games, and this does not look like anything Fable-like. This just looks like a weird game. Fearless contenders battling through ridiculous dungeons. Yep. Does just look like a silly game, and it might work, it might not. I'd say there's a higher chance of it not working. Then I already said that I think this Dying Light the Beast would have probably been DLC for Dying Light 2. This may be the beginning in which they do just make several series of side games for the Dying Light series, but they are certainly, Techland is reaching a point here where they need to make a completely different style of game. Otherwise they are going to pigeonhole themselves into a series that is not going to always sell. They probably already have done that to an extreme. They need a secret project that is completely different. Call of Duty Black Ops 6 first campaign footage shows off espionage gameplay. Borderlands 4 was announced. Supermassive's next horror title is called Directive 8020. Which, yeah. Raccoon Logic officially announces Revenge of the Savage Planet, which I'm not sure the Savage Planet games look like this before. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 has been delayed yet again. First half of 2025. A new Atari mini console has been revealed, which, yeah, Atari is really just being very gimmicky, releasing consoles. The company that owns Atari's name now. Although, honestly, I don't know what you would do. If I owned Atari, I don't know what I would do with it either. it's a fairly valueless brand. You can license the old games, but you would almost certainly need to license it to a bunch of third-party developers for everything you have any rights to, and try and make brand new remakes, reconceptualizations on extremely simple games like Jungle, or even E.T. You'd probably want to come out with E.T., and you're not going to get the E.T. Name, so you're probably going to have to come out with a game called The Alien, or something like that. But yeah, the actual Atari consoles mean almost nothing to me. I don't have nostalgia for it, and people who would have nostalgia for those games are getting older and older by the second and dying off. And there really is no retro fandom for Atari games, in my opinion. Anything pre-NES and that first generation of consoles were mostly garbage. August PlayStation Plus games catalog and classic games are now live. I'll let you read that from Video Games Chronicle if you're interested in the details. Same is true for Xbox Game Pass titles for console, PC, and cloud. Bad time to make those announcements, certainly. Then Opening Night Live. Now, I don't think we'll probably get a few more stories from Gamescom, but I don't think there's any other big presentation. So Gamescom just goes on now, I think, for at least till Friday or over the weekend. And that's about it. The Final Fantasy XVI director, which I'm not sure you really should believe anything he says, but he says it's probably likely that future Final Fantasy games will launch on PC day one. It makes a lot of sense. The way games should be made, Final Fantasy games should be in such a way that it would be super easy to release it on PC as much as release it on PlayStation. Of course, saying that out loud does certainly highlight a level of dissatisfaction that Final Fantasy XVI directors seems to be having with PlayStation exclusives, which I suspect that is reflective of how Square Enix also feels. Hours after release, Black Myth Wukong is a huge hit on Steam. I guess inherently him being a monkey isn't that big of a deal because you're just seeing the back of the character anyway, so you're just seeing the back of a head and armor. But yeah, it certainly, I think, would put me off a little bit to play as a monkey. But I mean, you do it in Donkey Kong, you do it in other games, you adjust fairly quickly. That wouldn't be the biggest issue I would have with it. Nintendo Museum gets an opening date and shows it off for the first time. Here we can see a general appearance of what the size of the place is. It is a big factory building, particularly for a Kyoto-based Japanese building. But it does also kind of seem like you just run in here and then you are attempted to be funneled off. They want you to walk in and see a bunch of stuff, but then they also want to funnel you off so there isn't just a huge crowd going all in one direction. Although I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese very much do file in an orderly queue and go around in just kind of a clockwise snaking pattern and then file back out. It does seem fairly empty right now. I assume there would be some plans for maybe a desk here or statues here. There's a lot of curved shelves and things like that. Let's see if we can get any of these pictures much bigger. No, because it's all one big picture, isn't it? So we'll use my magnifier and just make it a blurry mess. it is small samplings, I would say, more than anything at the moment, though. And maybe they'll have a Nintendo Store gift shop attached to it that sells exclusives. But yeah, when you're talking NES Famicom, seemingly is just this wall, and then Nintendo Switch brand new stuff is just this wall, and the Game Boy is over here, and maybe some more things here. It does seem like they're skipping over quite a lot as far as what they've made, what they've sold. There's no imagery here that lets me think that they're going to reference any of their arcade cabinets. I'm not saying any Donkey Kongs or anything like that, or their bowling alleys from the past, or their Hanafuda cards. Anything pre-Famicom seems to be non-existent. And inherently this has always been, I'm not showing you, am I? Sorry. Inherently this has always been the issue with a video game company or any company owning their own museum, is that if they are controlling, they're going to censor out a lot of history. And I can't call it anything other than censorship in this case. I would argue my own personal collection of Nintendo stuff, maybe not as rare as some of these Famicom things they may have, but just in the item counts, it probably rivals this collection. If I was just to take everything and put them in backlit glass shelves, I could think my personal collection might fill these shelves even more than what they have. And my collection is big, but certainly not a complete collection. Weirdly, I'm not seeing a single thing that's Pokemon in this at all. That being said, we may also, when the museum actually opens, find that there's just a lot more stuff that got moved in and decorated, and even a year later they may get much more settled to it. I would say that the Video Game Museum in Frisco, Texas also took a couple of years before it started to really feel like it was doing a decent job as a museum and having enough things on display. And there's just always a lot of work there to expand your museum and show off more things. And then there is also this temptation of museums not to show publicly what is in their museums, which makes it less likely that people will want to go, but it also kind of is just the old way of thinking. Dead Cells has received its last update ever, which, yeah, I'm sure that's sad for Dead Cells fans, but they've gotten quite a lot out of that game. Funko Fusion has gotten a PC demo and a Mega Man reveal trailer. I would be very surprised to see, well, I think I am going to be very surprised to see a bunch of adults playing Funko Fusion when it comes out. Indiana Jones is coming to PS5. That was a rumor that's been now confirmed. Modern Warfare 3 and Warzone Season 5 Reloaded update has been detailed. And then Star Wars Outlaw trailer showcasing Season Pass content. And that brings us to the Gamatsu articles. So, Monster Hunter Wilds gameplay previews. A game called Koira, I imagine is how you pronounce that. Launches April 17th for the PS5 and PC. Head Up has spun off development team into a fully independent studio called the Goon Squad, which is not a good name, particularly considering the most recent interpretation of the word goon or gooning, or reinvention of definitions. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 gameplay showcase video and screenshots are available at Gamatsu. Crimson Desert boss battle gameplay. Flint Treasure of Oblivion launches October 24th. What consoles? Steam, Epic Game Store, Good Old Games. Everspace 2 DLC Titans announced. The visual novel Stella of the End is coming to Switch in 2024. We're still getting some of those announcements. The Famitsu review scores for issue 1862. Let's see, what do they have here? Go Hell Go. Haven't heard of this. Got 30 out of 40. Kami Bako got 30 out of 40. My Nine Swallows. Let's see. They don't even know. Shadow of the Ninja Reborn got 29 out of 40. And then Visions of Mana got a very high 34 out of 40. Which this is the only real game I recognize. It'll be interesting to see next issue in particular if we see Black Myth Wukong getting reviewed particularly well or particularly poorly by Famitsu as a Japanese games review site. One thing will imply one thing to me, one thing would imply something else to me. Weirdly, neither a particularly high or particularly low score would feel legitimate to me, because my conspiracy leaning thoughts there are too strong. I would think that a Chinese game might get reviewed poorly, or if it doesn't get reviewed at all, there might be a bit of a conspiracy there, because the Japanese companies just don't want to give good praises to a Chinese company. If it was reviewed well, then I would believe the review as just being a natural review. Although, in fairness, I would say I've never really seen any major biases in Famitsu games reviews. I feel like they've been very honest about the reviews, much more than any other video game review site, which are all the others are pretty much not worth looking at or trusting. Double Dragon Revive details its series history, composer, and story. A dark auction, Hitler's Estate, is adding a PS5 version. Is this a visual novel? An authentic mystery adventure is what it's called. Yeah. And only a Japanese game company would dare have Hitler even be in the title. Although it does seem like in this case they're falling on the right side of history here and showing that Hitler is the bad guy. A Scandinavian folklore inspired open world adventure called Hella has been announced for consoles and PC. That might be very interesting. There's a certain type of mouse story fans out there, although I'm not sure too many of them are gamers, because there's been several you play as a mouse in a fantasy world type games, and they haven't really sold particularly well. Game Awards set for December 12th. A medieval punk roguelike action game called Rainbreaker has also been announced for PC. And all of these should be opening Steam links, but only some of them seems like they actually did. Mafia the Old Country announced for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Uncharted Wilds previews and gameplay. This game again. Yep. And we already have that on the follow list. And I ran it twice, so we're getting some duplicates here. Yeah, that's the only game that actually opened running the macro twice. So there's something wrong with my coding. It's not catching all the links it should be catching. Anyways, that's going to bring us to GameDeveloper.com. Headlines. Let's go ahead and throw gesture to throw that one back. So now we're at GameDeveloper.com headlines. It says Microsoft really wants you to know day one releases no longer standard with on Xbox Game Pass. Yeah, I'd forgotten they had done that whole change. Rip-off. Raycon Games, Ruiner is going to receive a film adaptation by Universal Pictures. Is it going to be animated? Sony is also making an upcoming Zelda movie, which I assume is going to be animated. I heard something, and I'm not sure if this is true or not. The original Super Mario Bros. Movie, the terrible one, which I actually sat through and watched somebody else watch it, effectively. It's not really that bad of a movie for the time. But apparently they were going to make a Metroid movie after that. Original Super Mario Bros. Movie had it done better. Which that would have been interesting, certainly. Although that's kind of hard to believe that they would have done that. Why make a Mario movie and then throw Metroid, which Nintendo has never really cared about, as your second movie? Why not make a Metroid movie first, since you don't care about it? Or make a Mario movie, then make a Zelda movie? Yeah. Making a Metroid movie pre-Metroid Prime could be basically anything, but it would make a lot of sense that maybe they were trying to copy the Aliens movies, which yeah, I guess that kind of works. Certainly, you could do it today. Really, the Alien series has been mangled so much. Making a Metroid live action movie or a Metroid animated movie would work fairly well. I kind of would like to know what are some of the latest Universal Pictures movies. Like almost all the movie studios, I've stopped paying attention to them, so I'm not sure any of them have made any good movies lately. Making a Zelda movie these days would also, frankly, be way more difficult than making a Metroid movie, because Zelda games are just longer and more complicated. And of course, there's always a chance that these live-action movies fail miserably. Black Myth Wukong opens to 2.2 million Steam players, which that is very much a testament to how there's just a lot of people that are just not playing any one specific game or playing games at all until something new and exciting shows up. And yeah, I imagine that is how most people and most kids go about it, is that they aren't just actively pulling out a Steam Deck or playing on the computer in particular. If there's no new game that's got them hyped on that, they would probably just be watching YouTube or looking for new content. Yeah, the power of new is still very powerful as far as a draw. The original voice actress, Japanese voice actress of Bayonetta, Atsuko Tanaka, and has died at age 61, fairly young. She was in Nier Replicant in the Bayonetta games and Dragon Age 2. She is also known for being the voice actress of the main female lead in the Ghost in the Shell movie, I think, and TV series. I don't think it ever changed, which that certainly puts a different spin on the Western voice actress for Bayonetta not being brought back for Bayonetta 3 and throwing a fit when also she was not brought back for Bayonetta 3 either. She probably knew she was either in poor health and probably had a hand in her not coming back. But yeah, year-long battle with illness is what it says. So actually, she probably was not. She didn't have this illness, at least, when she would have not done the Bayonetta 3. So that maybe there's less of a conspiracy there in the first place. But yeah, even at that 61, people really should be retiring a lot younger than they are. Like 50 really should be the retirement age for most people. But yeah, here you have a reasonable professional picture of her, as I always like to point out here. She was showing up for, this might have been some live action or CGI Ghost in the Shell presentation. This is not really the Ghost in the Shell I would expect. But yeah, this is probably a much more recent promotion of maybe the TV series, a new TV series. There's been quite a lot of Ghost in the Shell TV series, which I think was probably a mistake. They probably should have just stuck with the first movie and not done anything more from it. But yeah, we'll leave it at that. Backyard Sports is apparently back after an extended off-season via Playground production. The fondly remembered sports franchise will return to games and other media soon. When was the last time they made one of these? Decades. Yeah, these were like PC games from Humongous Entertainment decades ago. When's the last time one was made, though? Probably in the 90s. Yeah. I think I would have recognized a new Backyard Sports. Of course, in modern times, using the same name and the same concept, you've got to do a lot better than what the original 90s Backyard Sports games would have been. They have to be much, much better of a game to catch people's attention. But it is definitely a franchise that should not have been in a decade-long hiatus. Yeah, it has been at least 10 years. Wow. I'm surprised it's even 10 years. If it's 2024, that means they made one in 2014. I'm surprised at that much. Let's see. GameDeveloper.com is calling for submissions to talk about photography games, which I don't know if there's really a lot to talk about photography games. There's an occasional one that's an interesting gimmick, but that's about it. Hunt Showdown sees new concurrent player high with its 1896 update. And then North Beach Games opens a Prague studio to support itself and smaller developers. And then they have the story that we talked about before, where the hack developer Bling Game chose to cancel the Xbox version because they were having a nightmare porting process, which I haven't seen any update here of anybody else saying yeah, they also had a nightmare porting process. So it does seem like this is more of a hack Bling Game problem than a overall industry problem. And let's see, let's do some flawless cleanup here. The main thing here that we're going for as we go through all the new games on Steam is to burn through this fairly quickly because I'm under the wire as far as time goes. Yeah. One of the benefits of not doing Facecam and or just streaming in general is that you don't typically have to make yourself as presentable as you would if you were putting on a work uniform or going to an office wearing a suit. And unfortunately, with this medium emergency taking so much of my time, I have to admit that I am struggling to find free moments to make myself more presentable. Yeah. That is also true for just every single little house chore. It definitely is a case that there are, if someone is acting as a housekeeper, there is enough to be done to maintain a house in just your general situation, even if there aren't kids involved, which, yeah, if there are kids involved, there's definitely more than 8 hours worth of work in a day to be done, because it's its own separate 8 hours of experience to just keep an eye on kids. That being said, there are also some house husbands, housewives out there that don't do anything, or do very little. They don't probably do a little, and they're just not really doing 8 hours worth of work to justify being a house husband or a housewife. And what drastically changes that whole experience is the level of cleanliness in particular that you're looking for, because there is definitely a lot of repetition. Like, it's not crazy to sweep a hallway every single day if you have an active hallway, lots of people coming in and out. It's not crazy to clean bathrooms 2 or 3 times a week, things like that. But it is also not super crazy to not do those things if they're not being heavily trafficked. And there is certainly a point where you do cross into the realm of craziness as far as just OCD cleanliness. But you have to go to a fairly high level before it really does stop making sense. A lot of times, OCD germophobic people also do silly things that are not logical, like burning frozen burritos and only eating that was one of the things I saw in one show, where that was the only food they were willing to eat because they were afraid of germs. Well, that's just silly. First of all, you don't need to burn food to charcoal to make it safe. You only have to heat it to like 140 degrees internal temperature for a few minutes and you'll kill all the germs in it to make it safe. Now, that doesn't inherently mean you're going to remove any other garbage that might be in food if the food was actually dirty, but it isn't. But yeah, and certainly scrubbing yourself or showering like 12 times a day is not healthy. At a certain point you damage your skin doing that. Taking 150 degree Fahrenheit showers is not necessary. So yeah, when approaching any cleanliness, and this is a weird thing to even talk about, you do have to be realistic about it, otherwise you will hit a level of insanity. But then there is just some realistic stuff too. Every day there's more evidence that even HEPA filters aren't as helpful as you might think, and that dusting just every single day and keeping the air clean. Yeah, air cleanliness in particular is one that I think we've only begun to start to really realize how filthy inside air can be, and that humans are just constantly breathing out carbon monoxide and junk, and dust is just constantly coming into most houses. Most houses are not hermetically sealed or anywhere close to being hermetically sealed. One of the problems with HEPA filters is that it seems like they are very expensive and don't move enough air to counter the amount of air a human is actually breathing or creating, just walking around, skin flakes and dust being added. So by not moving enough air, you very possibly, instead of getting a HEPA rated filter, might be better getting a MERV 14 filter, or at least MERV 13 filter, and putting it inside your whole home air conditioner and filtering out the air, and just having the fan always run or on your air conditioner to move as much air as possible. Because even a filter that is less efficient and only gets 90% instead of 95%, if it's moving the air around 2 or 3 times as often, 95% and then another 95%, then another 95% is a lot better. Yeah. And it's questionable whether things like carbon pre-filters are really that necessary, or they catch dust, certainly. I'm scrolling down my Twitter feed here to see what, if anything, new needs to really be talked about. There is a massive amount of, it looks like, new announcements that have happened that we'll talk about on Friday. But yeah, so far there was some more Animal Crossing Lego sets too, which I think the Animal Crossing sets themselves are perhaps a little bit more attractive. So we'll show those off. They're not really doing anything super special, but they do feel more attractive than the Mario Kart ones did. Yeah. Still small little play sets. And I question whether 6-year-olds actually care about Animal Crossing. It definitely felt like to me that Animal Crossing was a adult game that adults like to play. Apparently, new Xbox accessibility offerings have been revealed, including an adaptive joystick. Here you can see a horrifically scarred woman with a joystick controller that does not really seem like it is mounted in any way, being pushed with her chin, which I can immediately tell you that is not an acceptable way for a controller to work, because unless her neck is fused that way, turning your neck that much is totally not advisable. Yeah, you don't want to put a crick in the neck or strain the neck of anybody. Inherently, I'll have to repeat myself here and say that almost every accessibility controller has to be customized to every single disabled person. This definitely looks like yet another commercial that Microsoft is putting their name on for a product that very well may not be even made by Microsoft. Which, yeah, the original accessibility pad square thing there with the big buttons was not made by Microsoft, so I would assume these accessories are not made. Yeah. So a whole bunch of different thumbsticks. Not a terrible thought. It does look like it might have a mount on the bottom. I would say 3mm mount where it can be screwed into it, although it may not actually be 3mm. But yeah. I think a lot of these accessibility controllers will definitely go down that path of having screw-in and replaceable, switchable analog stick things. Just a terrible screenshot though. There's just no reason you'd ever have it on the side like that. If you were going to have to control a controller with your chin, it would be right in front of your face. And it still doesn't work that way. You can't hit these buttons. You can't hit the triggers in that case. At a certain point, you would need an eye tracker if you're that disabled, that you don't have the use of either hand or feet. And at a certain point, you are just not going to be able to play games, unfortunately. Most games, almost all games. We already talked about Secret Level, but this does highlight a different screenshot thumbnail as far as what they're thinking about doing, or what they probably animated all of that before. And then Infinity Nikkei is getting promoted by the Epic Game Store, and I still want to, I hope that actually succeeds and comes to Steam at some point, because that is one of the few like games targeted towards girls that I think I'd actually promote towards girls. There's so few games like that where me clicking play with the way it's stretched and squished doesn't really matter. But yeah, there's just so few good games targeted towards girls. There's plenty of games that girls can play and aren't particularly targeted towards boys, but that's kind of it. They've released on YouTube sharing your channel via QR code. I might do something with that. Meanwhile, the CEO of YouTube is still just coming back, I guess, and kowtowing to different people in the Middle East, Iran or India. I'm not sure which one. This one, yeah, this is India. But yeah, he has basically said nothing about the YouTube since becoming the CEO, and he definitely just feels a lot like the last CEO. He said nothing about the last CEO dying either, but he's just like meeting celebrities effectively. Platinum Games did say that they were incredibly saddened to hear the passing of Asuko Tanaka, who provided the Japanese voice for the Bayonetta City series, which is just like the right response here. Deepest consult, just a short statement, don't have to have a picture, don't have to do anything more than that. And with that, that is going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and keep on watching. Thanks.